You have shown, you mentioned the vessel, you have shown extraordinary commitment to the vessel as a form throughout your work. And I wonder, is it a commitment to the form itself, or is it almost a commitment to the skill set and your idea of self?
This time round, it's the vessel. It's completely the vessel. And why wouldn't it be? There's something very, very odd about vessels. There's something very compelling about vessels. I take my hat off to sculptural ceramics and figuration, and I'm no leech. I really do allow a Catholic approach to ceramics. But actually, there is something extraordinary about making a space, which is what a vessel is, making a space. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's homo faber, man the maker, the people the maker, which is actually, there is still, and it doesn't matter, it really, really doesn't matter if something's behind glass or up in the air or wherever it is in the world, it still has this somatic bodily memory of vessels as use, of being something that people can use, put things in, hold containers. It has that thing about cooking and funerary ware and gift, all of which are a language, a language of human interaction, which is incredibly moving. It's incredibly moving. The reason that pots matter is that we've always made them. The world is full of broken shards. You walk down, any bit of earth is deep and dense with broken pots for a reason, which is that people have always loved them, made them, broken them, carried them around, shared meals with them, had epiphanies around them. So you know what? It's an incredible thing to be a potter.
Part of that language.
I feel like it's a gospel sort of singer.
Part of that language of pottery, and part of that language of your pottery and of human interaction with it, I think, is that sense of gesture in the work. And it's something that I've always kind of valued hugely in the work. I know that Geoffrey Whiting warned you of the dangers of gesture, but it seems to me hugely important.
Well, I mean, I love the fact that you make, after 30 years or so, I could make pots reasonably well, and they could be reasonably precise. I can do it. But actually, the joy of making something out of porcelain, which is a very exacting material, it's a tough, cerebral kind of material to use. And then, after you've made it, after you've finished it, after it's sitting perfectly in the world, then you go back to it and you just pick it up. And it's still slightly damp, so that your hand leaves an impress in it. Or you just, as you take it off the wheel, sort of nudge it with 2 fingers. And it's not an affectation at all. It's actually about letting something go in the world, which actually still has the hand near it, which I think is my claim on that family of making, that depth of how things have been made. The most extraordinary experience as a maker of pots, a recent extraordinary experience as a maker of pots. I was on a hillside in Jingdezhen, outside Jingdezhen in southern China, which is where porcelain was created 1,400 years ago. And it was a hillside where they dug up the kaolin, the extraordinary place, which really is the sort of place for porcelain. And it was an old kiln site from the Tang dynasty. So it's 1,300 years old. And it's just shards, it's just broken pots, and there must have been hundreds of years of potters opening kilns where things have just gone wrong, and they've just smashed them. You know, another firing's gone wrong. I feel real kinship to this. And what do? You know, you pick it up and you throw it over your shoulder to the great spoil heap over there. And I picked up a shard. It was a foot ring of a tea bowl. Beautiful, articulated foot ring. Fine, stunning. And the potter, there'd been a crack when he'd made the pot in the base. And he'd taken a bit of clay and he'd smeared the clay over the crack, which is 1,300 years ago, someone saying, oh God, this might work. And it didn't. But I feel so close to that potter who tried to mend a pot and it didn't work. Because
ceramics is an extraordinary medium in this regard, isn't it? Because it carries the imprint of an individual over centuries across time.
Yes, and you know, I absolutely adore, you know, there was that picture of those extraordinary sort of Bauhaus pots and minimalist functional pots, functionalist pots, and I love those serried industrial ranks of things. But I suppose my pots are serried ranks of things which have gone wrong.
I think you expressed it very, very beautifully quite a number of years ago now in a very short essay you wrote for Gallery Besson, and you quoted Robert Herrick. I don't know whether you...
God.
Putting you on the spot. But you said that pots had a wild civility.
Thank you.
A wild civility and...
my favourite line of poetry. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's good. It's a good line.
It is a good line.
As Herrick said, a wild civility. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll take that back.
Yes. And this was more, I forget exactly how he expressed it, but more engaging than if objects were too perfectly formed. And he was talking about a freely tied shoelace, I think, in the poem. But it somehow captured exactly what you were about in adding that sense of individuality and gesture to the work.
It's sort of that really matters to me, because you know you can see a sort of grand vitrine, you know, in a grand gallery, and it's beautifully lit, and it's perfectly articulated, and you know I've worked with incredible fabricators to make the you know, to make it all beautiful. But it's not about that. It's about that with the things which are inside, which are wild, bashed, broken, mended attempts at getting a lyrical moment, a lyrical, poetic moment, which has rigor. So that's the reason that those images of texts matter to me almost as much as the images of Korean pots, because those images of Walter Benjamin's noted lists where he crosses things out and reiterates and reiterates and reiterates and tries to get back to the first thought, or that wonderful picture of the impossible proofs of Proust, where he can't let go and comes back and back and back, and marks and remarks. That's kind of what's happening in a vitrine. You're letting something be, but you're knowing that it's an attempt, and that you have to do another one after that.
This emphasis that you're placing on the kind of on text as a physical document is quite interesting, because obviously you've spoken about poetry and music in the work, and that's perhaps something that you kind of hear rhythmically, but many of the works have this sense, well, they are physical objects, of course, but looking across your career, there is this tendency to work on an increasingly expansive scale, but with increasingly small individual units. So there is a very clear relationship, physical relationship, I think, is there not, between the almost like the physical form of your works and the idea of text as something concrete.
Yes.
Yes, that's a.
I mean, what's mattering more and more to me is also the titling of works. That when I first started making installations, and you'll remember this because I put one into one of your first exhibitions at the V&A called The New White, I called them cargoes because I had this idea of porcelain coming all the way from across the Silk Road and it being carried, this idea of cargo. And I got to cargo number 18 and thought, this really won't do. This is just pathetic. You care about titles. And I don't want to be one of those people who has a whole corpus of work which goes untitled, 372. And so I started to put titles with work. Now, it's kind of become really critical for me because it's clear to me that sometimes works, what I'm working on, comes from a moment in language or a moment in music, and then develops into something spatial. But there's a title somewhere, words, and sometimes it takes a very, very long time to find out what words should go out with that piece. In fact, actually, in the book, this is just I'm so pleased with this. They allowed me to put a list of all the last titles that I'm working on. In this is great. This is lists. There's a whole section on lists in this book, which it's almost the best bit. It's the lists, but it really is. Lists of titles. And sometimes, actually, there's a really nice thing you can do if a work really matters to you enormously, which is to give it a really errant title. So it's like, here's the work, and you lob a title over there, so everyone runs over to the title, and it allows you to have the piece all to yourself.